Did you ever wonder why it's important to let men chase? Why women are the emotional center? And why that dynamic produces a healthy nuclear family? Well, today we're going to do a deep dive into the laws of physics, cardiology, epigenetics, and Carl Jung's psychology to understand why it's so important to let women be the emotional center and for men to do the providing and the protecting. And we're going to get into Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla, and all of that. But I like to start where I started. And a few years ago, I started really resonating with a Cherokee proverb. I was in the middle of healing my childhood trauma. I was in my masculine energy for most of my life. I'm 55 now and I'm in my feminine energy now, but it really helped me kind of put femininity and masculinity into perspective. So let me bring that up and then we'll dive into all the science behind it. All right, I have to present this. So, the dedication to my book, My Inner Heroine, Exploring Feminine Pain, is this Cherokee proverb. And it says, a woman's highest calling is to lead a man to his soul, so as to unite him with Source. A man's highest calling is to protect a woman, so she is free to walk the earth unharmed. So, leading a man to his inside. Well, how do you get to his inside? Well, I know you got to go through the heart to get to the inside, and the heart is a vortex. So if the heart's a vortex, how is femininity not a vortex, right? So I had to start asking myself all of these questions. So let me stop sharing and we're going to get into the science behind it, okay? So I had to start with energy because Einstein says the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. The field meaning the energy field. The particle meaning, in this instance, the body. Okay. But how can women control their energy field and their vortex in their heart to attract men in, like to retain a man? Right? Because it's all about attracting men in, attracting his desire to provide and protect for you, to encircle you with his provisioning and protecting. So, how can women do that in healthy ways? And Carl Jung, that'll be the end of the discussion. I did a deep dive with ChatGPT. We'll get into all of that. But let's get into how all of this functions in terms of the energy coming out of the heart and attracting men to women. So we have Albert Einstein, the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. And then we have Nikola Tesla, who said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And when we learn about the heart, we're going to learn that blood moves without the heart in a fetus, in a spiral. Okay? Spiral. And the heart's a vortex, right? So the heart encourages the spiral movement that the blood already engages in before the heart is created in the fetus, which I found just fascinating. But let's dive in and hear about how the energy, our energy fields come out of our hearts so we can understand how this functions physiologically. And then we can talk about the psychology around it and how women can be healthier in their femininity to really kind of fuel this healthy process between men and women. We're going to start with Dr. Joe Dispenza, a neuroscientist who specializes in healing trauma. Because the reason that women aren't able to do this from, when they become 17, 18, 19, 20, ready to look for a mate is they're not learning in childhood. So why aren't they learning in childhood? That's childhood trauma. But let's see how this Einstein quote impacts us.
Einstein said the field, the wave, the energy is the sole governing agency of the particle. Energy controls matter. He didn't say the particle controls the particle. He said the field controls the particle. If you change the information in the field, can you change the projection, the particle in three-dimensional reality? This is a holographic universe.
Okay, it's a holographic universe. That I had to learn that goes along with vortices, right? It's a holographic universe, means it's a vortex projecting everything to the boundary. Do you see? Both of those go together. So then if the heart's a vortex and we all have these energy bodies, that makes us pretty powerful beings. So let's dive into how in epigenetics, what is epigenetics? Epigenetics is what epi means before, and then genetics, right? It's just, this video shows how powerful the field is. That what determines what's healthy and not healthy is by the field and not our genetics, because epigenetics has proven that less than 1% of our diseases, mental health, physical, come from genetics. Okay, so it's more perspective on how powerful the field is. Okay, and the field passes through the heart. Okay, everything starts in the field. And so the field controls the heart too, right? The field is the sole governing agency of the particle. It's just an amazing quote here. Epigenetics.
Whatever picture you hold in your mind, the brain releases complementary chemistry that matches that picture, and it releases it into the body. And the chemistry of the blood is what controls the genes and the behavior. Children, when adopted into a family where there's cancer running in that family, the adopted child will get the same family cancer. But the point, the adopted child has totally different genetics. What was the point? It was being adopted into a family where the programming of that child is what caused the cancer. It's consciousness who releases the chemistry to the environment that controls the genes. And you can change your consciousness, and you can change your environment. And all of a sudden I say, oh my God, we were programmed to be victims.
So I was programmed to be a victim as a child because of my childhood trauma. So my energy as a victim, if I'm a victim, am I going to want to attract in more men? Am I going to be open to attracting in more men? No, right? If I believe, because our beliefs control our body. Like if I think of a hamburger, my mouth salivates whether a hamburger is here or not. Field controls the particle. If I, see a handsome guy, I can go home and fantasize about him and get turned on, and he's not even present. The field controls the particle, right? So whatever is in our fields, is in our consciousness, is how our bodies act. So when I used to have a lot of anxiety in my field because I hadn't processed my childhood trauma and it was still in my subconscious, which is part of me, I was acting as if I was constantly running from men. Tons of anxiety. Okay? Tons of anxiety. And I'll link all these videos below. But this is the really important point, is that women were the emotional center in the household. The emotions in our souls, which I'll show you in a minute, communicate via emotions. So soul is the divine. So the woman, the emotional, is the spiritual, is the divine. And it communicates out through our hearts, and our hearts are our vortices. But, what I found, and Dr. Andrew Huberman, another famous neuroscientist, it talks a minute about cancel culture. How people are trying to change things on the outside so that people feel better on the inside. But that's the wrong direction. The heart is a vortex, and vortex is a holographic universe. So it's an outward projection that we see. And then the universe is a mirror so that we can see ourselves. So my heart is a vortex that projects my energy outward to the border so that I can go, oh, there's the good, there's the bad. And I'll show you in a minute what my energy, the vibration of my energy determines what I perceive and what draws my attention. Okay. So it's an inside out job. Like changing the world is an inside job. And that's what Dr. Andy Huberman is going to show us right here. So let me pull that up.
What we need to do is start to figure out how we can, I think, especially for the next generation of kids, how to teach them to regulate their nervous system so that they recognize that pulse of adrenaline as placing them in a compromised position. Like we have to leverage the idea that being able to hear and listen hinges on the ability to be calm. So therefore, the ability to be calm is crucial to hearing and listening is crucial to our advancement as individuals and as groups. The problem is everyone's been trying to do this backwards. They've said we all have to get along. We have to cancel culture. We all have to, listen to one another. And I think, again, we have to start from the inside. We have to teach it physiologically. Now, I don't have a master plan on how to do that, but one of the reasons I'm here and one of the reasons I'm, teaching neuroscience on Instagram and not just in my laboratory is until we can learn to regulate the self, I don't think we're going to get where we want to go as a culture. What we need to do is.
So yes, until we learn, let me stop sharing. Until we learn to regulate the self, we're not going to get very far. Because as you see people in society who aren't regulated, they're yelling and screaming, all this stuff. And then you can't have a productive, mature conversation. But the reason these people act this way is because they didn't mature their emotional range as a child because their parents were emotionally immature themselves and punishing the children for doing anything that made the parents upset. Okay, like I didn't have access to all my emotional maturity when my children were young, so they were on the receiving end of tons of, I projected my self-hate onto them. We live in a holographic universe. So let's look for a second at all of the how this works, that the emotions are projected out through the heart, and then we'll get into how the heart is a vortex, which is so important because women are the emotional center. So we attract men to us, we don't chase, okay? Men love the thrill of the chase, okay? In a healthy way, okay? Not tons of games and mental games and things, no. But they love the chase. They love a woman who's exclusive, who's feminine, and who isn't giving herself away and understands her value. I mean, her value is her ability to be the healthy emotional center inside of a family. Okay, let me bring up my presentation again. Okay, and then we'll go to the right page. Here we are. Okay, so the laws of physics. The Map of Consciousness by Dr. David R. Hawkins explains how all of our emotions are expressed at different hertz from our energy field, from our soul, with shame being 20 hertz and enlightenment being 700 to 1000 hertz. So when a woman expands her emotional range, she's able to go and take her man into those deeper, darker emotions because you have to surrender to your emotions before you can climb. The kinetic energy gained by the surrender is what fuels the climb. Like the feminine has to drop her handkerchief for the man to decide what to do next. When the feminine is flirting with a man at, across the room, when her eyes lower, that gives him his opening. She surrenders and he decides. So the surrender comes first, and then, the kind of action or deciding comes next. So the deeper that the woman can go into her emotions, the higher the couple can climb. And I really had to accept that. And I experienced enlightenment for the first time 2 years ago. And I had to accept that my soul planned that for me, that if I want Mount Everest size wisdom, which I see that as enlightenment, then I had to take on Mount Everest size wounds. Because the deeper you die, like life is like jumping on a trampoline. The deeper you go, the higher you fly, all based on the laws of physics. So this is how I get to, the universe as a mirror. Which is showing me myself every moment as a constant feedback loop for self-improvement. And that goes together with the holographic universe and the heart as a vortex, because my energy comes out my heart, and the neurological system in my heart is far more complex than my brain. And the heart sends far more signals to the brain and the other way around. So when you bring your heart into coherence, that brings your whole nervous system into coherence. And like Dr. Andrew Huberman was talking about, we need people to be calm and have a coherent nervous system so they can talk like mature adults and hear opposing positions without having to freak out and get super triggered. Why are they super triggered? They don't know how to process their emotions. So they're suppressing tons of fear, guilt, and shame. And when it gets triggered in the process, they blame everybody else. Because what environment were they raised in? An environment where people projected their problems onto other people and then blamed them for it. If a parent can't remain calm when a 2-year-old is crying and the 2-year-old gets spanked or hit or, punished, I mean, it's a 2-year-old or even a 1-year-old. Or the infant's needs not getting attended to. I mean, I was taught to leave my children to cry it out at night so they learn to sleep on their own, but they aren't designed to regulate their own nervous system. I wasn't taught that. But why was I taught that? Because they want women to go to work and for the kids to be raised in childcare because we put money and convenience before health and well-being. But when health and well-being come first, we have to accept who we are and how this all functions. Because if health and well-being came first, then my mom would have been taken care of. My dad would have made sure that even after the divorce that we were cared for, which we weren't. But that is because my parents came from a traumatic childhood as well. And then so goes the generational trauma. So let's do a little more of a deep dive into how this works as a holographic universe. So my energy is projected out through the vortex of my heart onto the quantum field so I can see myself. So if I have part of my energy that's selfish, and then I project it outward, and I perceive selfishness in someone else, that is my soul showing me my own selfishness. Now that person's probably selfish too, but I don't have control over them. They are not my responsibility. I am my own responsibility. And when I spend time trying to change them, I take away time that I should have spent on changing myself. Okay? We come here as souls having a human experience to see and understand ourselves for self-improvement opportunities. So let's watch this physics experiment, and we're going to notice that, let me see if it's the right spot, that we have 512 hertz. They don't see each other. They don't recognize each other. They have to be vibrating at the same frequency to perceive each other. Like Rumi said, what you seek seeks you. This is it. You live in a hollow universe. When I project 440, resonate at 440 are going to move. Oh, and then I perceive them. But if the energy doesn't move them, yeah, sorry about that. But if I'm not perceiving something, then how can I interact with it? Like if someone's hiding in the bushes and they're not moving, like the 512, the 440, I don't see them. I keep going and I don't interact with them. And they're just not there. Okay, but when we resonate at the same frequency, that draws our attention. If you go to the movie with your best friend, what your best friend is going to take away from the movie is not going to be identical from what you take away, and both are equally valid. Because your best friend's energy field soul is different from your soul. Okay? So let's get into, always say heart and soul, right? Because the soul communicates out through the heart. And physicists have proven this, that the energy bodies, all of our energy bodies are connected through our hearts. And here's an example. So there's tons of videos of dogs getting super excited 1 or 2 minutes before their owner comes home, right? Why is that? Well, they're communicating through their hearts, and it's not even the same time every day, but it always happens. Well, how does the bear know to climb the tree in Florida one day before the Category 5 hurricane hits? Inner authority, the wisdom and knowledge inside of our souls. Every soul has the same wisdom and knowledge, but we've all accessed different parts of ourselves. So we don't all have the same kind of access to our capabilities, but we all have the same ones. All of our souls are, made of the same fabric. Okay. So let's do a deep dive now into the heart and how the heart is a vortex, and how fetal blood flows without a heart, which was just mind-blowing to me. When I found that, I was just excited. Okay, here we go.
Let me just read this because I think it's actually probably one of the best descriptions of the heart that I've ever run across. They taught you the heart was just a glorified meat pump, that it squeezes and pushes blood like some crude mechanical device, a hydraulic engine made of flesh. That is what they want you to believe, because if you buy into that primitive lie, you never ask deeper questions. But it is.
Yeah, it's an outside-in approach that's just a pumping the blood. And we learn from Dr. Andrew Huberman, that's not how reality functions.
It's false. It has always been false. And the real science proves it. Dr. Francesco Torrenguas, a Spanish cardiac researcher, discovered what the textbooks refused to acknowledge, that the heart is not a pump. He dissected thousands of hearts and found that the heart is a single continuous muscle band folded into a spiral. He proved that the heart works like a vortex generator, creating suction and torque, not pressure. He called it the helical ventricular myocardial band, and it changes everything. The real movement of the blood comes from pressure differentials, electromagnetic flow, and coherent resonance.
Like Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Secret to the universe right here, how blood flows.
The blood spirals naturally. It need not be forced through miles of arteries and capillaries. The so-called pump is not strong enough to push thick fluid through 60,000 miles of tubing. That is basic physics. That lie was dead on arrival. Here is the truth. Blood moves before the heart forms in the embryo. That is, by the way, a documented fact. It flows via frequency, resonance, and electric charge. The body is a field, not a factory. Your heart creates a toroidal electromagnetic field that radiates 6 meters from the body. This field syncs with the earth, the sun, and every living being around you.
That's why nature therapy is so impactful and helpful, because it's, the soul is on the inside. And so when the soul goes out and connects to nature and brings that back in and the heart helps with that process, then that connection with nature, which heals the body naturally, is so, so important. We shut ourselves down when we stay inside all day long in buildings and don't, take our shoes off and ground into nature. We do ourselves a disservice.
It is a resonator, a tuner, a conductor. It aligns the rhythm of your cells. It feels, it remembers, it emits, and it responds to emotion, thought, light, sound, and breath. When you feel love, grief, fear, or peace, your heart transmits it. It is the central frequency modulator of your biology, not a pump. And the institutions know this. The Heart Math Institute has measured these fields for decades. They know the heart has more neuronal cells than parts of the brain. They know it is a second brain. They know coherence in the heart transforms the entire nervous system.
And that's what's important for healing childhood trauma, because that is the process. My childhood trauma made my field full of shame, guilt, and fear, which informed my heart, the kind of the center of our nervous system, not the brain. It's far more complex, and it's far more signals the brain the other way around. So when I healed my heart, in my soul, which then resonated in my physical heart, my physiology changed. I used to have tons of upper back pain and need a chiropractor constantly. I don't need that anymore, because my energy was so out of balance. It brought my physiology out of balance, as the universe is a mirror. Our bodies are a mirror of our soul. So when we become sick, like Dr. Gabor Mate always says, when one does not learn how to say no to safeguard their physiology, the body will say no for them in the form of disease, such as cancer. Fascinating.
So why are they still teaching children a 400-year-old guess from William Harvey that has never been updated?
That is the question I'm answering, and that comes from an external locus of power, which is a Christian worldview. And I'm dealing with the patriarchy, and women are healing from this. Like, how are we going to create a healthy nuclear family, post-feminism? How are we going to encourage women to stay home as the emotional center if they don't understand the importance of it? So this is why I explore all of these topics, is to help everyone understand the importance of women staying at home. The emotional center, emotional intimacy, is where mental health is created and sustained. But women are not the emotional center anymore, because we've told them to go get a job. Well, when no one's the emotional center and there's no space to create healthy emotional intimacy, which is the woman's job, connect someone to their soul, to their inside, to their emotions. She's not home to do that, and no one's doing that. We get a mental health crisis like we have today. And then we send everyone to therapy, but that doesn't work because talk therapy only engages half of the brain. In order to heal, which we've proven now, that you have to engage both sides of the brain. You need to act and you need to talk. So there's a lot that we have to learn from, but let's get into how we can be healthier in our femininity. Because the more feminine women are, femininity fuels masculinity. Women aren't dropping their handkerchiefs, they're just yelling at men. So then men run away. How do we get women to know how to drop their handkerchief with wife energy and not, oh, do you want to be a friend with benefits? Do you want to have a one night stand? I mean, that doesn't wife a woman. And then women are wondering why they're dropping a handkerchief that says, want to have a one night stand, and then they're not getting wifed. Okay, because it's all in the energy. The field is the sole governing agency of the particle. So if the women are dropping one night stand field energy, and then men are deciding on that, but women have to learn how to drop wife energy in a healthy way. So I asked, how is femininity like a vortex using Carl Jung analysis? And I said that because women are the heart or the center of the relationship, and the heart is physiologically a vortex, and so is the energy. It's a vortex. So here we go. Jung would have a lot to say about femininity as a vortex, especially once you bring in archetypes, the unconscious, and psychic gravity. So, one, a vortex equals psychic gravity, not force. Okay? Like a vortex, you can't tell a black hole what to do. You can't command it. It's not an outside-in relationship. You're not going to get anywhere. It's a feed it with energy and see what it spits out, right? So when men treat women in healthy ways, they're going to more likely to spit out healthy energy, right? But how do we get men to treat women in healthy ways? It starts with the feminine, because the feminine's a vortex, and the feminine has to draw a man to her. Well, how can she create a healthy vortex so that she can attract a man and then retain a man? That's what I had to learn because I used to attract players. So in Jungian psychology, femininity isn't primarily about action or assertion. That's masculinity. It's about relatedness, containment, and attraction. Okay, what Jung often associated with the eros. So the vortex doesn't chase things; it draws them in. That's why we let men chase. Okay, when women chase, it's like their vortex is closed down. They're acting like men are a vortex. One man with multiple women around him, he's acting like a vortex. But that's the wound, that's the lie in the subconscious, because women attract men to them because women are the emotional center and men go around the periphery with providing and protecting. That's who we are biologically, physiologically, and in our souls. That's what fuels us. Men have a healthy hormonal balance when they spend 90% of their day in their left brain, and women have healthy hormonal balance. They spend 90% of their day in their right brain. What's right brain? Forgiveness, compassion, creativity, intuition, self-reflection. Left brain, planning, strategizing, action. You see the challenge we created for ourselves? So femininity symbolically functions like a vortex because it pulls attention inward, attracts psyche, emotion, and meaning, creates a center that reorganizes what comes near it. Like men can't just approach me like that. Boundaries, like I'm in control of how close a man gets to me by my energy. I clearly communicate. But when a man doesn't read my energy, it's up to me to draw that boundary. And I've had the situations where they weren't appropriate and I didn't draw the boundary and I learned my lesson. So in Jung's terms, this is how Eros operates, through connection rather than direction. And they've proven that the feminine brain, the women's brain, we spend more time in our brain than men because we have to make all these connections. We're the great connector. Men are the great disconnector. So if you look at brain scans for a woman to make a decision, it comes in here, she's got to make all these connections, and then it comes out here. That's why a healthy woman will usually take longer to make a decision, because her neurology functions differently than a man. Men are designed to go from the back to the front without making all these connections. Well, women's nervous systems are far more robust than men's nervous systems. Nervous system is emotion, and as I showed you, our souls communicate via emotion out through our hearts. So men's nervous systems are far more fragile, evidenced by a higher male infant mortality rate. and several other things. So women are designed to be the emotional center, but we live in a Christian worldview, which is outside in, and the man is in the Christian worldview, the spiritual lead of the family. But he's not designed to channel energy constantly and be the emotional center, which is also the spiritual center, because the soul from the universe. He's designed to disconnect from his emotions, from his soul, to be in his left brain to plan and strategize. So telling him he needs to be in his right brain, connected to God all day long through channeling and creativity and intuition, puts him in his right brain all day long and sets him up for failure. Well, when a man fails, he's easily controlled. When a woman fails, she's easily controlled. All right. So the vortex fits perfectly because the unconscious is deep. It has layers, and the deeper you go, the stronger the pull. So that's why the more connected you are to a man, the stronger his pull is to you, because he's just captivated because you're constantly pulling him into you. And then what, right? But that is the goal. You want him to be so connected to you that he's so deeply connected, you pull him in naturally all the time, and then he let goes, and you pull him in, and there's a fluctuation of energy, and fluctuating energy is alive energy. We're not meant to just stay at enlightenment all the time. We have to go into our fear, guilt, and shame, into our shadow, into our subconscious, learn more about ourselves, bring that out into the light, bring the wisdom and knowledge, climb our next mountain, and then go back in. And we do that together. This is why feminine figures in myth are so often portrayed as irresistible, dangerous, and transformative. Not because they're evil, but because the unconscious always dissolves the ego before it renews it. Okay? So it's the dissolution of our fear, guilt, and shame that women do. And because you can't see that process externally, I understand how that can be scary. So for Jung, femininity shows up psychologically as the anima, the inner feminine image in a man. The anima acts exactly like a vortex. She captivates attention. She pulls consciousness inward, seduces the ego away from rational control. So, rational control, you can't control a vortex. You can't command a vortex because the universe is holographic. The power is from within, not from without. When unconscious, she can swallow the ego, obsession, projection, infatuation. And we're seeing projection a lot today. Like you watch the TV show The View. You're selfish. You're a homophobe. You're a transphobe. You're racist, right? They're talking to themselves. Right? Like when I perceive selfishness outside of myself, that is my soul showing me the selfishness inside of myself, because we live in a holographic universe. The universe is a mirror. My heart's a vortex. Our energy spirals. It doesn't go direct. Okay. When integrated, she becomes a guide into depth, a source of creativity, a bridge to the self, just like the Cherokee proverb connects a man to his soul. All right, vortex, death and rebirth, individuation. So Carl Jung really did a lot of work about how a healthy child individuates from the parents. The woman's role is the inside work. The right brain is forgiveness, compassion, and nurturing. And you have to start with the self. We can only meet others as deeply as we meet ourselves. Okay? So the deeper this internal connection, the deeper that, like for me, the more deeply I meet myself, the more deeply I can meet my man, and I can help him meet himself, as we just saw. Okay, so the process of individuation is when the child learns how to regulate its own nervous system without the parent. So the parent's no longer in control of the nervous system, of the energy of the field. You teach a child how to do it on their own. That's a natural, healthy maturation process. But I didn't go through that because fear, guilt, and shame was projected on me. I internalized it, so I behaved and I shut up. But I wasn't an individual because I was still busy responding to my childhood trauma. And as long as I'm busy in my energy field, my subconscious, my shadow, I was unaware, yeah, then I'm still in that parent-child relationship and I'm not an individual. Okay, so the vortex implies loss of orientation, surrender of control, ego death. But that's what we want, right? That's what we want. We want to understand how reality is created, that our minds are not in control. Our energy field communicating out through our hearts are where it all happens. So femininity represents a psychological space where old identities dissolve, certainty collapses, and new wholeness gestates. This is why Jung linked the feminine to alchemy, the container, the womb, the dark phase before gold, the surrender into the fear, guilt, and shame, and then you climb out of it. And I even have a 2-ball experiment where it shows 2 balls on 2 tracks. One goes slightly downhill and one has hills and valleys. And the one with the hills and valleys travels faster, and the higher vibrating the energy, the faster the energy, the more transformative it is. That's why enlightenment is so transformative at 700 to 1,000 hertz, where shame at 20 hertz, not transformative, stuck. So you don't use the vortex, you submit to it, or it rejects you. So it's kind of like surrendering to your heart. So I have a free ebook below to help you learn how to process your emotional wounds. And my first one is Appreciate, Learn, Forgive. So the vortex has pain. You got to submit to that pain. Well, how do you do that? You got to open your heart. So how do you do that? Gratitude. Gratitude reduces cortisol, makes your nervous system more calm. Okay. Now, as Dr. Andrew Huberman said, listening and conversation, you have to learn how to listen and conversate with yourself first so that you can learn to do with others. That's why children need to spend so much time around their parents, because they need to learn how to listen to themselves, and their mom, a healthy mother, is the best mirror, and the father as well. But we send mom away to work all day long and she doesn't have time to learn and practice listening to herself. She can't teach her kids. So then they have an external locus of control, and that sets them up to be addicts of like social media and all other problems. So why it feels both magnetic and terrifying. A vortex promises meaning, union, and wholeness, but it demands vulnerability, emotional exposure, loss of dominance. So loss of dominance, we're all exploring here in society in America, what is the feminine lane and what is the masculine lane? What I've, figured out through my work is that as a healthy feminine woman, leave me at home. Like, you leave me at home with kids, I know how to take care of them. The only time I need to be told what to do is if, we're outside and it's unsafe. Carrie, run inside, there's a gun. Okay. But, I don't need to be dominated over. I need to learn how to swim in my lane, which women used to learn at home from their mothers. But, we stopped that and sent women to work because money and convenience is more important than health and well-being. And now we have a mental health crisis. So this is really important. From a Jungian lens, fear of femininity is often fear of the unconscious. Right? And femininity started being repressed 2,500 years ago. Right? And then we had the patriarchy. But why was that repressed? I'm going to get into that in another video. But the deeper you go into your fear, guilt, and shame, the higher you soar into your next, enlightenment experience. So what I saw is that the reason we had the patriarchy is we had to repress femininity and really kind of push ourselves into tons of fear, guilt, and shame on how we're treating ourselves so that we could expand our consciousness all the way up to enlightenment for the collective. That's why, from an energy perspective, that's what I see. And I'll do another video on that. But that's why patriarchal cultures try to control the feminine, right? Like Christianity, you go to Jesus, forgiveness, a masculine soul for a feminine quality in the right brain, right? You go to a hierarchical, a church run by men to learn compassion and self-reflection. I mean, I see Christianity as institutionalized femininity. That's why it doesn't work. That's why they don't know how to teach love thy enemy, because they don't understand that they're creating their own enemies. They're an enemy to themselves when they don't acknowledge women's true role and what's a healthy dynamic between a man and a woman. I know we're still figuring it out, right? They moralize it, flatten it into roles, because raw femininity doesn't obey rules. It reorganizes reality around itself. It's a vortex. Healthy femininity reorganizes reality around itself. Like, I attracted all these men into my life they were universes and mirrors. It's how I learned this in my book. But and I didn't go on a date with any of them. They included Justin Waller and Andrew Tate. But by me not letting them get that close to me, my vortex is reorganizing reality around me. That's how powerful women are. So why would I want to go be a man? I don't know. Femininity as a vortex is not about passivity. It's about centrality, the emotional center, the spiritual center. Masculinity moves outward, femininity draws inward, just like the Cherokee proverb. And there's tons of research showing that Native indigenous cultures, where they do this dynamic, femininity outward, masculinity outward, have far healthier relationships with their children than in Western culture, where we've taught men the spiritual center, that's inward, but in Christianity, God's above and outward, external locus of control. You do any research into psychology, when you have an external locus of control, that sets up the victim mindset, codependent relationships, like children who are abused and don't heal. My parents were still an external locus of control, which for an infant, like an infant up to age 7, the mother helps the child regulate their nervous system, because the women's nervous system is far more robust than the man's nervous system. That's one reason women were designed to be home with the kids. But we don't accept this. We don't teach the kids to kind of become independent of the mother's nervous system by age. We don't teach this, and we're shoving in tons of fear, guilt, and shame. The child gets attached in a healthy way and doesn't know how to let go. So subconsciously, they're still in that parent-child relationship, not acting like a grown-ass human being who can make grown-ass decisions, because they're not. They're not emotionally mature. The parents didn't set them up for this. Okay. Okay. Oh, that's the end of that. All right. Well, that is the end of today's discussion. I hope it was interesting. I hope it gave you, some things to think about. This is just how I do it. I think about new ideas, I explore them, and then I just keep exploring and exploring and exploring and see what comes up. But I hope it was informative. I hope that for women, it helps you do a deeper dive inside of yourself. For men, I hope it tells you what kind of woman you're looking for. You're looking for a woman who has a strong connection to her heart and soul, who's able to process her emotions and can help you do the same. That is the feminine job. Okay. So please like and subscribe. Thank you for listening. Bye.